Lucas sends fans a save-the-date note for Valentine's Weekend 2012, and Star Wars invades the Windy City this weekend. It's Wednesday, March 16th, and you'll hear about those stories and more this week in Star Wars. This Week in Star Wars is your source for new and noteworthy developments from the galaxy far, far away. I'm your host, Matt Fox. And now this week's lead stories. While it has been some time now since it was officially announced that both Star Wars trilogies were being converted into 3D for re-release in theaters in the coming years, but we now have an official release date for the first of those films. Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, will be released in theaters on February 10th of next year, less than a year away, according to StarWars.com. While the February release date is obviously earlier than the late spring, early summer time frame that a number of people had projected, it is consistent with the re-release dates for the special edition of the original trilogy in 1997. This slightly earlier than expected release date has led to some internet speculation that the Episode 2 re-release may follow later in 2012, possibly around the holidays. Obviously, there has been no comment on that matter from Lucasfilm at this time. These details are available on StarWars.com, as well as an interview with Special Effects Supervisor John Knoll discussing the process of converting the prequel films to 3D. The Chicago Comic and Entertainment Expo, better known as C2E2, will be held this weekend, coincidentally enough, in Chicago, Illinois. As with last year, Lucasfilm has a not insignificant presence at the event. Star Wars publisher Del Rey will be having a panel on Friday to discuss new and upcoming books in the franchise, and comic publisher Dark Horse will be having a 20th anniversary Star Wars panel on Sunday. DK Books has a booth at the event and will be showing off a number of Star Wars titles throughout the weekend. And This Week in Star Wars' official favorite Star Wars artist, Katie Cook, will be having a How to Draw Star Wars presentation Sunday afternoon between 1:15 and 1:45, which is highly recommended, if not required, for any This Week in Star Wars listeners in attendance. C2E2 is being held this Friday through Sunday, March 18th through 20th, at the West Building of McCormick Place in Chicago, Illinois. More details are available on the official C2E2 website, as well as StarWars.com. This week in collecting news, we break an unspoken This Week in Star Wars rule by highlighting a specific eBay auction. Given the myriad and ongoing tragic events in Japan in the aftermath of last week's earthquake and tsunami, collecting website yodasnews.com has posted for sale on eBay a set of the 5 Celebration 5 patches that were made available by regional Star Wars collecting clubs. The patches, when combined, form an image of Boba Fett and were highly sought after at the convention. 100% of these proceeds from this auction will go to the American Red Cross to assist in their disaster relief efforts in Japan. The auction runs through March 21st and can be found on eBay by searching Star Wars CV, as in C5, Boba Fett State Club's patch set. Alternatively, I encourage you to simply make a easy and pain-free donation to the Red Cross through iTunes. And we commend everyone at Yoda's News for putting together this auction. In other, less grave collecting news this week, Gentle Giant announced and made available for pre-order 4 new Star Wars-related products. These include a Darth Talon statue, which really manages to convey the image of nudity, a mini-bust of Shia Vizsla from the upcoming The Old Republic video game, and the next 2 large-scale vintage action figure recreations, this being an Obi-Wan Kenobi and a Jawa with cloth cape. These are available for pre-order from the Gentle Giant website, as well as a number of online retailers. They are all scheduled for fall of 2011 release, which means we should see them sometime around 2015. Wave 6 of Hasbro's Vintage Collection action figures have moved from the world of online retailer to brick and mortar, as they have been spotted at Walmarts and Targets across the country. Also spotted are the latest waves of Clone Wars figures, including the resculpted and recostumed Anakin and Ahsoka figures, as well as the latest wave of vehicles. In publishing news this week, Dark Horse has released At War with the Empire Volume 1, the latest in the ongoing series of Star Wars Omnibus collections. At the same time, Dark Horse announced on its blog that they will begin publication of Star Wars The Old Republic The Lost Sons this June. It will be a 5-part miniseries, which will run up to the release of the Old Republic video game in the fall of this year. Which leads us to video game news. Star Wars The Old Republic, the video game, will be released in the fall of this year. More specifically, Electronic Arts Chief Financial Officer Eric Brown made comments at the Lazard Capital Markets Technology and Media Conference in Boston, which were republished and reprinted on DarthHater.com, which reported that the long-awaited and frequently delayed massively multiplayer online role-playing game would not be available until after the end of fiscal year 2011, but still sometime during calendar year 2011, which, for all of us normies, translates to sometime between July and December of this year. Mr. Brown also conveyed some of the interest in the game, as he reported that over 1.5 million gamers had registered to be part of the online beta for Star Wars The Old Republic. But any delay in release has not stopped LucasArts and Electronic Arts from running the Old Republic hype machine into full gear. It was announced this week that you can already register your Old Republic guild online in anticipation of the game's release. If you're interested in forming a guild or interested in finding out what a guild is, a full FAQ page is available on the Star Wars The Old Republic website at LucasArts. Meanwhile, attendees to the Penny Arcade Expo, better known as PAX East, in Boston last weekend, were given the opportunity to actually play the game. Attendees at the aforementioned C2E2 convention will also similarly be blessed. Meanwhile, in the much more immediate future, LEGO Star Wars 3 The Clone Wars, at long last and after numerous delays of its own, will be released next Tuesday in the United States. A new and fairly humorous TV spot for the brick-based video game has been premiered and can be seen on comicbookmovie.com. Zombies are all the rage these days, and Star Wars is not missing out on raising the dead. No, I'm not talking about Death Troopers, but Star Wars in concert. The Wandering Orchestra, playing John Williams' greatest hits from the 6 Star Wars films and hosted by Anthony Daniels, seemed to wrap up their caravan sometime in the middle of 2010. However, it was announced this week on StarWars.com and on StarWarsInConcert.com that 2 more shows would be performed on June 3rd and 4th at the famous Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles. Tickets are available for pre-order currently on the Star Wars in Concert website, and having seen the show during its swing through DC in 2010, I highly recommend it if you're in the Southern California area. Also back from the dead is a story we reported last year on This Week in Star Wars concerning a lawsuit in the United Kingdom brought by Lucasfilm against one Andrew Ainsworth. As you will recall, Mr. Ainsworth was involved in the manufacture of the original Star Wars helmets during the production of A New Hope in the mid-1970s. Years later, Mr. Ainsworth went on to continue manufacturing Stormtrooper helmets for resale to collectors and costumers. When Lucasfilm got wind of Mr. Ainsworth's activities, they asked him to cease and desist, and when he refused, our friends at the Presidio brought a $20 million lawsuit claiming that Mr. Ainsworth was violating their copyright. Both the UK trial court and appeals court agreed with Mr. Ainsworth. ruling that stormtrooper helmets are not a work of art and are therefore not protected under copyright protection within the United Kingdom. This week, the case was heard by the UK Supreme Court, which, after deliberation, will rule on whether or not U.S. copyright law extends to stormtrooper helmets manufactured by one of Her Majesty's subjects. Our last bit of news this week also comes from Great Britain. The newspaper The Guardian is sponsoring a 2-day course which will take place in London at the Renoir Cinema on May 14th and 15th of this year, which is entitled The Anatomy of Star Wars. The event will be hosted by Gary Kurtz, producer of Star Wars, as well as The Empire Strikes Back and American Graffiti. Mr. Kurtz will be joined by Sandy Lieberson, who at the time of Star Wars' production was the vice president of 20th Century Fox's international operations. The Guardian's summary of the event says that the 2 days will pay particular attention to the film's origins and inspirations, script, visual and audio development, special effects, editing, pre- and post-production, marketing, and distribution, which basically covers the gamut. Registration for the event is £150. It is limited to 250 individuals. It is available at theguardian.co.uk, and having seen Gary Kurtz speak at Celebration 5, it is almost enough to get me on a plane to go see it. If, by some miracle, we have a listener in the United Kingdom, I encourage you to please go see this show and give us a full report on it, and also to encourage Mr. Kurtz and Mr. Lieberson to bring the show to the States. Now, I'm on record as being a fan of the vintage collection, but this week I've got a little nit to pick with Hasbro. I have that disease where what I like to collect, I like to keep on the card, so I pay a lot of attention to the card. Now, as you may know, Hasbro has always used the card backs of the vintage collection to show the purchaser what the original version of that figure's card back looked like back in the day. Now, Hasbro is a toy company concerned with making toys, so if there's an error on a package, I'm willing to let it slide. And with the figures from the original trilogy, they were usually close enough not to worry about it. But with the prequel figures, a few more errors have been creeping in, but I probably would have ignored those too until I saw the new Attack of the Clones Clone Trooper. The original Clone Trooper was a preview figure on a Power of the Jedi card from early 2002. This is the figure that should be on the back of this card. It's not. Instead, they show the red Clone Trooper on a Saga card, which was available on Midnight Madness of Attack of the Clones. But it's not a mistake. Hasbro photoshopped out the red. They intentionally got it wrong. Why? A quick programming note. I will be on vacation next week, and Mrs. This Week in Star Wars has asked me not to bring my laptop, so there will be no episode next week. We will return the last week in March, tanned, rested, and ready for 2 weeks' worth of Star Wars news and my baseball preseason predictions. As always, thanks for listening, and if you like the show, please leave a review on iTunes. And that was This Week in Star Wars. Join us again next week for more news, notes, and developments from the galaxy far, far away. Visit www.thisweekinstarwars.com or www.twisw.com for links to old episodes, news about the show, as well as links to some of the stories we discussed in today's program. You can follow us on our breaking news Twitter feed, TWISWcast, and we welcome comments on our Facebook page. We also welcome news suggestions, questions, and comments via email at host@thisweekinstarwars.com. Help us grow the community. If you enjoyed This Week in Star Wars, please go to iTunes and leave a positive review of the podcast. You've been listening to This Week in Star Wars. We troll the web so you don't have to.
This Week in Star Wars is not affiliated with Lucasfilm, its subsidiaries, or any other entity mentioned in this podcast. Star Wars, its characters, and creations are the property of Lucasfilm. All other trademarks are property of their respective trademark owners. This Week in Star Wars is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This podcast is copyright 2010 This Week in Star Wars. Invaluable technical assistance provided by WebStorm Interactive. News, comments, and questions can be directed to host at thisweekinstarwars.com. More information, links to stories presented, past episodes, and additional contact information are available at www.thisweekinstarwars.com.
Fat, drunk, and stupid is no way to go through life, son.